Okay, so I'm going to start off this morning with yet another of my language rants. So, once upon a time, when the authors of the various books of the Bible sat down to write, they just wrote the whole book, not like one chapter at a time. We divvied up their books into chapters and verses later to make it easier for people to talk about the Bible. And we made those chapters and verses standard, regardless of what publishing company is printing what translation of the Bible or what church it's being read in. Chapters and verses are an extremely helpful thing to have added to the Bible. Hey, you know that story about when Jesus did that miracle? I'm going to need you to be more specific. The healing! Yeah, that's not specific enough. When he heals the woman, do you understand what the word specific means? In the Gospel of Luke. Okay, that's a little more helpful, I guess. Let's try that again. Hey, so in Luke chapter 8, give me 1 second to flip to that page. Okay, got it. Chapters and verses are a good thing. Anyway, point being, we've added in chapters and verses and given names to various stories over the years. On top of the standardized chapters and verses, if you flip through most Bibles, you might find little headings here and there. Things like Jesus heals a hemorrhaging woman, or Jesus again foretells his death, or the parable of the fig tree, which we read last week, things like that. They're helpful if you're flipping through looking for a specific story or passage, but don't remember exactly where it is. Different Bibles might describe a story with a different headline, or start or end it a few verses earlier or later. Today, we have a story that many people are used to calling the story of the prodigal son. So here's my language rant. Who here has ever used the word prodigal in a sentence outside of describing the prodigal son in this specific story? That is what I thought. So who here could give me a definition of the word prodigal? That is also what I thought. And to be fair, I had to look it up in a dictionary myself this week. So we know that it can be used to describe a character in this story. So maybe it means like someone who comes back because he realizes he was wrong, someone who made some terrible life decisions that he comes to regret, someone who wants to strengthen a bond with a family that they haven't been close to for a while. Those would all be extremely valid guesses based on context clues. Anyway, the word prodigal means lavish or extravagant or unreasonably excessive. So one could be prodigal in the sense of wasting one's resources in an extravagantly stupid way, which I think is what the editors were thinking when they added in the heading, the prodigal son, in Luke 15. But one can also be prodigal in the sense of having an extravagant and seemingly excessive willingness to offer grace. So as we come to our gospel reading, I want you to bear in mind that no matter what some editor scratched out who knows how long ago, this story is not about one son. It is about a family, and it's about prodigal grace. Our gospel reading this morning comes to us from Luke chapter 15, verses 1 through 3 and 11 through 32. Hear now the word of the Lord. Now all the tax collectors and sinners were coming near to listen to Jesus. And the Pharisees and the scribes were grumbling and saying, "This fellow welcomes sinners and eats with them." So Jesus told them this parable. There was a man who had 2 sons. The younger of them said to his father, "Father, give me my share of the property that will belong to me." So he divided his property between his sons. A few days later, the younger son gathered all he had and traveled to a distant country, and there he squandered his property in dissolute living. When he had spent everything, a severe famine took place throughout that country, and he began to be in need. So he went and hired himself out to one of the citizens of that country, who sent him to his fields to feed the pigs. He would gladly have filled himself with the food that the pigs were eating, but no one gave him anything. When he came to himself, he said, "How many of my father's hired hands have bread enough and to spare, but here I am dying of hunger? I will get up and go to my father, and I will say to him, 'Father, I have sinned against heaven and against you. I am no longer worthy to be called your son. Treat me like one of your hired hands.'" So he set off and went to his father. But while he was still far off, the father saw him and was filled with compassion. He ran and put his arms around him and kissed him. Then the son said to him, "Father, I have sinned against heaven and before you. I am no longer worthy to be called your son." But the father said to his slaves, "Quickly, bring out a rope, the best one, and put it on him, and put a ring on his finger and sandals on his feet. And get the fatted calf and kill it, and let us eat and celebrate. For this son of mine was dead and is alive again. He was lost and is found." And they began to celebrate. Now his elder son was out in the field, and when he came and approached the house, he heard music and dancing. He called one of the slaves and asked what was going on. He replied, "Your brother has come, and your father has killed the fatted calf because he has got him back safe and sound." But the older son became angry and refused to go in. His father came out and began to plead with him, but he answered his father, "Listen, for all these years, I have been working like a slave for you, and I have never disobeyed your command. Yet you have never given me even a young goat so that I may celebrate with my friends. But when this son of yours comes back, who has devoured your property with prostitutes, you killed the fatted calf for him." Then the father said to him, "Son, you are always with me, and all that is mine is yours. But we had to celebrate and rejoice, because this brother of yours was dead and has come to life. He was lost and has been found." This is the word of the Lord. So today's story is already pretty long. If you're watching online, you saw 3 different slides to show the text of the whole story, because it couldn't fit on one graphic and still be in a readable font size. So we skipped over 2 parables that come right before this story of a father and 2 sons. And all of it is part of Jesus' response to some people who were grumbling and saying, "This Jesus fellow welcomes sinners and eats with them." Jesus tells a story about a woman who lost a coin and was ecstatic to find it again. And he tells a story about a sheep who wanders off and how the shepherd seeks out the lost sheep and rejoices when all 100 members of the flock are reunited. When something that was lost is found, you are happy. We might read today's story as being about the younger son, the one who leaves and returns, the one who is a prodigal spender until he runs out of money. We might read today's story as being about the father, the one who exuberantly welcomes his son home, the father who has a prodigal love for both of his sons, no matter what. We might see the prodigally loving father as a metaphor for God, whose prodigal grace is big enough to embrace anyone, no matter what they've done. It's a great story, a dramatic one, creative fodder for art and books and films and music, a popular story that many people are at least a little familiar with, even if they haven't read the Bible passage itself. But we might also read this story and kind of identify with the older son, the one who stayed, the one who did all the hard work while his brother was off dancing in a fancy club somewhere and drinking champagne. The older son never broke his father's heart or shamed him by demanding that he sell half of the family's lands and livestock. Like, yeah, it's great that his dumb little brother came to his senses, but shouldn't we hold off on the big celebration until we know he's back for good? What if he's just here because he wants something more from Dad? What if he's planning to find a way to cheat the family out of the fruits of our labors? What if he's not even sorry at all, and he's only come back because he's hungry and just wants the food? Isn't it the older brother who deserves the party as a thank you for everything he's done for the family? It feels like his younger brother is being treated as their father's favorite son. It isn't fair. But grace isn't fair. And on the one hand, that's a really good thing because none of us would be worthy of the kind of grace that God offers us. But on the other hand, if we're being honest, it's a little bit annoying that God's kingdom doesn't have like a VIP section for the people who worked hard and showed up when people needed them and treated others with kindness and respect. This Jesus fellow welcomes sinners and eats with them. Yeah, because sinners were lost and now are found. While reflecting on today's story this past week, I listened to the Pulpit Fiction podcast, on which one of the pastors hosting it made the point that when grace is for us, we want it to be amazing. When grace is for someone else, we want it to be exclusive. This Jesus fellow welcomes sinners and eats with them. From our human perspective, all resources have a limit. There is only so much clean water in the world, only so many eggs in the refrigerator, only so many bodies that can fit in an auditorium. And if we're honest, there's a limit to our patience. There's a limit to our generosity. There's a limit to our willingness to forgive. It can be hard to conceive of a God who does not have any kind of limitation. This Jesus fellow welcomes sinners and eats with them. Yes, because the love of Jesus doesn't have limits. He can love you and them and everyone else too, all at once, and still have more love to give the world. This Jesus fellow welcomes sinners and eats with them. Yes, because God offers us grace that is lavish and extravagant and full to the brim and overflowing. God offers us prodigal grace.